Hello and welcome to Tactical Rock 40k. My name's Toby Bennett. I'm currently the reigning UKTC top Dark Angel and a top 100 player in the world. And today we are going to be talking about making the most of the Lion. Now, many Dark Angels players, myself included, are huge fans of the Lion. He is one of the big reasons that I play as much Dark Angels as I do, and I love the fact that his rules are finally in a position where we absolutely can take him, use him, and get really stuck in with him and get those really cool like lore moments as going as well. Huge fan of the Lion. But in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to break down those key strengths and why they are strong, what his weaknesses are, how we can mitigate them, where he's best to use, and which units support the Lion the most, or which units the Lion supports the most. Because the Lion has now gone from this kind of one-dimensional beatstick to now an extremely good force multiplier, a defensive buff, and then still an extremely good beatstick. So it's really exciting to see that mix of strong abilities, although my bugbear is that he's still strength 12 and Guilliman is strength 14 for no apparent reason. Although I imagine that's how Letha's players feel with the fact that Magnus is technically better in combat than Angron, or at least stronger. So without further ado, let's jump straight in to those strengths. So as I say, the beatstick potential for the Lion is extremely high. His damage output can quite happily cut down big knights without batting an eyelid, really. I like playing the Lion in Gladius so that he has access to Lance and that extra AP, just if your opponent's a 2-up save but no invuln, like putting them on 0 save, I think is particularly useful. And if we ever go into a meta where Votann are particularly strong, I think that's a great case use for why that going to AP5 could be super critical. But he really does slaughter through things without invulnerable saves because he's good high AP. He's not really got much of a shooting threat, but like he really will chop through things without an invulnerable save. Obviously, when you go into a 4-up invulnerable save, often sometimes even a 5-up invulnerable save if there's enough bodies, like with Admech, things can drop off a little bit. But when you get into, say, an Imperial or a Chaos Knight, or a Rogal Dawn, a Land Fortress, another good example, a Land Raider as well, you can really just do a huge amount of damage. With the fact that the Lion only needs to get half of his attacks to wound, and if you have used the Lance ability in Gladius, you are just straight killing a Land Raider. That's hugely powerful. And I think that's a real sign of just how strong the Lion can be, especially when he's also got those rerolls. So anything that's not got an invulnerable save, be that infantry or tank, he is just going to go through like there's no tomorrow, especially when he's got those 16 attacks. Only strength 6, so a little on the low side, but with the Lance stratagem, again, really solid. AP 3, a sustained hits 1, damage 2. He's going to kill marine equivalents very quickly. And I think, to be honest, being able to flex between reliably killing tanks and other big things, but also like just sweeping up infantry is just so useful. It really allows the Lion to fill that multi-purpose role, especially since he is fights first. So it really does let you have that kind of that heroic intervention threat, pose those potential questions to your opponent and leave them in the lurch. It's really difficult to plan around that. I think a good example of it was I had an opponent set up for a charge into some scouts with a blob of 10 possessed, which usually would then just eviscerate the scouts and really put me on the back foot. But then with the Lion there able to heroically intervene, my opponent low rolled a little bit on his 5-up invulnerable saves and ended up losing 7 of his possessed, which was very useful for the rest of the game because suddenly 2 of those possessed had to hit into the Lion, only 1 of them goes into the scouts, and I keep both of those units. So the Lion's ability to really change what your opponent can do both in their turn and your turn, just with his sheer damage output mixed with that fights first, really does allow you to dictate the pace of the game. I personally believe that the Lion is the best anti-tank that we have available to us in Dark Angels. I think he's the most reliable. There's very few other units in Dark. I genuinely can't think of any off the top of my head that can like one-shot a big knight. The Lion can, because he's silly and great and can do 36 damage just like that. I'm quite a big fan of doing 36 damage to a knight, especially when now that they're tier 11, 3-up save without any invuln in combat. Again, with the lance stratagem, and you don't even need the extra AP for this, you're hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, wounding on 2s, re-rolling 1s, and they don't get a save. So on average, you are just slaughtering those big knights. Obviously, a lot of the time they are lancers, which does change your maths, because again, 4-up invulns. We're going to talk that a little bit more in the weaknesses section. But the ability for him to just disregard something like Canis Rex that easily is hugely impactful. And the fact that suddenly a rampager can't charge him just because he'll pick them up before. Another great use case was against Pack. So the Little Knights one for Chaos Knights had 14 War Dogs in it. The Lion killed 3 of the carnivores, surviving 2 of their fights on death, and then eventually did die, I think, to an explosion. But in doing so, he'd killed 3 of the, I think it was 6 units that I was actually worried about that could kill Deathwing Knights. So that's huge. Like the amount of damage that he just sliced through with ease. Some of it on my turn, some of it on his. He killed 2 in one activation, which was quite entertaining. One of them was slightly damaged, so I was able just to go 4 here, 4 here, done. And that was rather tasty. But he is just extremely good anti-tank. I've always been impressed with the amount that he can do. Then we come on to the force multiplier aspect of the line. We've already mentioned his potential damage output into those big knights, but because he gives out that aura of the re-rolling ones to hit and wound in combat, he's just improving that army in general and giving you Oath of Moment redundancy. Now, what Oath of Moment redundancy means is that you're able to use that for something like a Land Speed of Vengeance because you have the reliability of those re-rolls elsewhere. Usually that's because you're hitting on 2s in combat with either Deathwing Knights or Inner Circle companions, or even Azrael as your key damage dealers in combat. So the Lion's essentially just massively boosting your ability to put your oath into a slightly more relevant target for your shooting, which is honestly a weakness for Dark Angels. Our shooting is not as good as other Space Marine shooting, just because we don't have the +1 to wound oath. And we don't make the best of save indicators or repulsor executioners, all that kind of stuff. Being able to shore up our shooting by always having oath for it, because the Lion has handled that side of rerolls for combat, is really very useful. And then alongside that, obviously those Deathwing Knights are anti-vehicle, anti-monster 4-up. And it's so critical with them being able to reroll those 1s to wound, because suddenly you go from that 50% chance to above a 50% chance of converting that wound. And at that point, I think you're in a really good spot to start using the Lion's able to kill 1 tank, Deathwing Knight's able to kill another. Suddenly your damage is just so much more efficient, and you're really just owning that area of the board once you've connected with your opponent. Obviously, if you want to check out my previous video on skirmishing to make sure that you are able to actually connect with all of your key pieces, we'll link that below. So make sure you go and check that out to see how you can set up the line to make sure you can use all of these key strengths. Now, something that came in with the Lion's rework was his mobility, and this was something that I was really excited about. Essentially, it's an ability called Uppy Downy, where you can put the Lion in your command phase back into reserves, and then because he's got deep strike, he can come back on the board 9 inches away from any enemy troops, which is a very good ability, because if he's in a random spot that's like ages away from everything else, he can just redeploy, be 9 inches away, and go for that 9-inch charge. And you don't usually have a reroll spare, because with a reroll, it's a 49% chance of it happening. So it's still slightly over average if you achieve it, but it's worth the risk, I think, sometimes. But my preferred method for this, because to be honest, most of the time I have the Lion just sit in his auras after turn 1. But if I go first, I love picking up the Lion, putting him back in reserves, and because he started on the board, he ignores all of the rules surrounding when those units are able to come in. And because he's able to do that, he can then rapid ingress in my opponent's turn 1. And if I'm able to do that, that's how I was able to do the scout move that I mentioned with the possessed, where I was able to rapid him in, present that threat. My opponent already had the charge set up, so he had the choice of either charging and getting heroic, or he had the choice of just letting me charge and scoring that primary. which was obviously not a very nice spot for him to be in, which is why he elected to charge, because I think a lot of the time, just that ability to go, you don't know where I'm going to put this lion. And then he moves 8 inches, so he's definitely getting a charge. So even if you don't offer me up a heroic, I'm going to be able to get in and kill that threat there. Another game I had recently, my opponent had been quite aggressive with a push forward with a Rogal Dawn, and then I was able to rapid ingress it, line in a nice safe spot, no other guns on the line. He pushed forward, picked up the Dawn as if it was nothing. It's so critical being able to do those cheeky little moves. That mobility, especially on the turn one, it can turn that kind of go first disadvantage into being a massive advantage, which I think is a really useful ability for the Lion. Then finally, the durability buff is really quite simple. He gets a 4-up feel no pain to mortal wounds in an aura of 6. We are a very elite army. We don't have that many models. Mortal wound spam is a problem for Dark Angels, even if we do have the once per game ability. Being able to have that at all times just elevates your survivability. And as I say, in a low model count army, that cannot be underestimated. Back when Custodes went from having the 4-up to mortal wounds as their detachment rule back in Index, to not having that, they became an irrelevant army just because there wasn't enough of them around, and they had to go through so many points drops before they've eventually become relevant. So that durability buff, huge. But let's talk about weaknesses, because weaknesses are still important. Now, he does have a 3-up invulnerable save. Excellent. The 3-up invulnerable save, you can truly scam people with that, because sometimes you just don't roll less than 3 because you can re-roll it, which is really very useful. But on average, you do fail 33% of those saves. And if your opponent is well equipped, as most people are right now for dealing with things like Catan, a lot of the time that's things like melters. That's going to go through him very quickly. As soon as you start dropping those saves, it can be like, cool, here's 8 damage. And then he's on 2 wounds remaining, and you're a little bit in trouble. So there are a lot of problematic things that you've got to prepare for with that 3-up invulnerable save. Obviously, again, you can just scam people, or you can underroll on it. And then suddenly you can lose a 315-point unit far too quickly. So that is his weakness. It's great because your opponent will have to overcommit to kill him, but equally they might just low roll. Sorry, you might just low roll, and at that point suddenly you're losing the line for very little in return. And there's going to be some games that you lose just on not rolling those 3s, not rolling that 3 in that critical position. I've had it before with melters. It was absolutely horrible, and it has lost me the game. So it's something to bear in mind that he is not indomitable. He does die, and that 3-up invulnerable save can be very fickle. He does have an inefficiency into 4-up invulnerable saves, because he has some really high quality hits, but he's only got 8 of them. Usually, if all of them hit and all of them wound, 16 damage will be enough into one target. However, when he's going into, say, units of 5 Custodian Guard, if he hits and wounds with all of them, which he should do on average, still only 4 of them are dying on average. So that does still leave a guy alive. And yes, of course, 1 Custodian Guard is not, well, it's unlikely to do a huge amount to the Lion. Not impossible, but it's still not picking up that unit. And that for 315 points compared to the very low cost of a 5-man Custodian Guard unit is quite disappointing. And other times, if your opponent just has that moment when they just get a little bit of a high roll, Val, great example, obviously they get Miracle Dice support as well, it can really make life difficult for you. It's made life very difficult for me in the past before. Charging into a Riptide, on average, should pick it up nice and comfortably. Don't manage to, then get blasted because it can fall back and shoot. So that inefficiency into the 4-ups can really scupper the Lion. So it's just something that you've got to plan around. You do really want to get him into those units that don't have an invulnerable save, if at all possible. And then finally, he is damn CP hungry. So you've heard me mention a lot about Honor the Chapter, the Lance stratagem in Gladius. You also want to keep up a CP so you can re-roll his invulnerable save in case you fail one too many, which I often do. You also want to have that rapid ingress CP if you do pick him up, and the heroic intervention CP. So yes, it is great that we have Azrael to support that narrative and to make sure that we keep on getting that CP through, because goodness me, it's important. It's why Azrael is almost always the first name on the roster, because he's just that good. But the Lion is very CP hungry, and that does take away, if you're in Gladius, suddenly you're less likely to be able to use that fight on death or an interrupt as much as you may like. However, I don't want to talk about weaknesses because weaknesses are boring and the Lion is amazing. So let's jump into best use cases. I've talked about this a hell of a lot. Lion plus Lance equals dead tanks or dead knights. I think that's it. It just is that simple. He's just so efficient. All you got to do is run the numbers and you see just done, dead, sorted. The big thing for me is that he supports the go turn. And what I mean by a go turn is when you finally commit all of those resources, push through into your opponent and say, hey, I'm going to do as much damage to you this turn as possible, and you will not have enough resources to push me back when it comes to your turn. That's what a go turn is, and the Lion is massively supportive in that because he can quite happily commit and kill just about any target. Obviously, there's some select few that he won't, but he'll kill just about any target, and then he's allowing other units to really get that killing power through as well. So your Deathwing Knights hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, wounding on, say, 3s, rerolling 1s, or if they're into a tank, 4s, rerolling 1s. It makes life so much easier. And with the Grand Master, you're hitting on 2s, rerolling those 1s, and you can fish either for those lethal hits or those sustained hits. Personally, I prefer the lethal hits. With the Relic Weapon, just because I really like Strength 7, either or is very useful. Alongside that, obviously, it's still, as discussed previously, frees up Oath of Moment to go for your shooting targets, keeping them a little bit more efficient. It's very nice standing the Lion in the open while he's lone opt with a unit usually behind a wall that's nice and safe, or another lone op unit, that is also an option. But doing that allows you to just go, I'm going to sit him in the open, and if you don't come nice and close to me, which is where I want you, then you're in trouble because you won't be able to do any damage, and then I'm able to just push forward with the Lion consistently. Now, this is a particularly nice one with something, say, like a deep striking unit, where you can let your opponent basically set up all fully and then be like, well, cool, rapid ingress within 3 of the Lion, he's now lone opt. And that will really ruin your opponent's day. Make sure they know that you can do that at the start before you do anything, because you don't want to pull that gotcha. But it is a really powerful ability to be able to do. It's why you'll often see me have the 55-point Lieutenant in Phobos armor in my lists, because he's really just damn useful. Next, and finally, actually, it's the threatening of Heroic Intervention. Heroic Intervention is such a powerful ability with Fights First. And the nice thing with the Lion is that he can just touch one model with his base, and then they're going to get maybe 3 models into him if you position carefully. And at that point, the Lion is doing so much damage that he's really causing issues for your opponent. And then finally, best supporting units. So I've talked about how Deathwing Knights pair with him the best. Super flexible in terms of the target that they're going for, but he also is a massive force multiplier for them. And he gives them that little defensive buff too, which I find very useful. Just not having to pop their Watcher is super handy. And that Oath redundancy with them, again, it speaks for itself. I've already talked about it a lot. It's great. Azrael is an incredible supporting unit because he gives that extra CP. Plain and simple. He makes sure that you are ticking over on your CP economy and being able to sink the CP that the Lion demands into that unit, while also being able to do other things. You are going to have to be light on like vanity CP rerolls, but equally it's well worth it. Scouts are another great one, mainly for that turn 1 trick. It's going to come up like once, twice a tournament, but when it does, you'll probably win the game. And then finally, Inner Circle Companions are another really great example, similar to Deathwing Knights, because when they're going into those characters, they're hitting on 2s, so they're supported by the Lion's reroll 1s. Reroll 1s with sustain 2, allowing you to like fish, is very useful, and it's something that I'm really excited to try. Overall, the Lion is incredible. And if you're a Dark Angels player or just love Dark Angels, now is the time to play him. He is on every list that I've written because he is such an impactful and powerful unit. Really hope you've enjoyed this video. Make sure that you like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, interact with the socials. It's all massively appreciated. This has been Tactical Rock, and remember, stay loyal. Cheers, guys. See you later.